Big phone versus small phone. Which one of these is truly best for you? Now, this may sound like a stupid question because most smartphones out there just have one screen size, and depending on what you're trying to buy, you may be stuck with a smaller than average or larger than average phone, and you may not have much choice there. But in case you do have a choice, like you have a normal version or a plus version, or nowadays it's called a pro version, I don't think anyone realizes the real meaning of Pro, but whatever. The bigger phone is called the Pro in most cases. So if the specs are same and if you are fine with the general performance of both, should you get the Pro over the normal one or vice versa? A few things may be obvious to you right off the bat, like the actual physical size and the weight, but a couple of other things that you may come to know after using it for several months, and you may live to regret that. So let's see how it will be to use a small phone or a large phone for a long period of time, and what are the experiences that you should expect, and make your choice accordingly. If you go with a smaller phone, you will deal with a smaller battery, and that is a downside for more than one reasons. Firstly, if you have a smaller battery, not only does it last you a lesser time depending on how much you use, but also you will have to charge it more often. And smartphone batteries are all lithium-ion batteries that only last for a certain amount of cycles before they degrade. Degrading is basically the reduction in capacity of the actual battery itself. So you may know that the battery capacity is measured in the number of milliamps of current that it can provide you per hour. So if a battery can provide you 4000 milliamps per 1 hour, it will be a 4000 mAh battery. And the only way it can do that is by having physically bigger size and being filled with electrolytes. Technology hasn't evolved yet where we can have tiny batteries that can deliver a long amount of power, like those graphene or some futuristic batteries that we have heard of. So if you go with a tiny phone, yeah, you probably already know that the battery life will be less, but the battery health may also die quicker because you're constantly charging it more than you charge a larger phone. So the battery cycles will increase than the in the same amount of time as you would use a larger battery phone. So in a year or in a month even, a 5000 milliamp hour battery would not be charged as many times as a 3000 milliamp hour battery. Now, of course, that is not a universal truth. For example, iPhones have had the maximum capacity for 3000, but since the hardware is optimized so well, it does last a very long time. So if you're buying an iPhone, that's a different story. But if you're buying a general purpose Android phone, which is generic hardware with Android software, then yeah, the hardware, the actual numbers kind of matter. So unless you're buying a tiny phone with a thick body like this, for example, this tiny 5-inch phone has a 4000 milliamp hour battery. So this has lasted me a pretty long time, and now it has degraded after like 7-8 years. So I mean that those are things you have to consider. Like if a tiny phone is to have a big battery, it will be thick and bulky. And if you want a slim and lightweight tiny phone, it'll have a smaller battery which will degrade much faster. So the overall life of your phone may be reduced. That won't be much of a problem with a bigger smartphone. Like, of course, here also things matter, like how you charge it. If you constantly charge and use it at the same time, and if your battery is heating up a lot, like your device, if it constantly heats up a lot, then yeah, the battery will degrade faster there too, because battery is not a fan of heat. But if you're somewhat responsible and allow your phone to charge up in peace, and not use it constantly and game constantly on it when it's being charged, then yeah, you can get away with using your phone for a long time. And especially if it's a bigger phone, you will enjoy a naturally bigger battery in it. Second thing that you have to kind of consider when you're buying a big phone versus small phone, that's in-hand feel. Now you obviously know that a bigger phone will be slightly difficult to hold in one hand depending on how long your fingers are. But here's something you have to consider. Distributing weight for the manufacturers will be much easier on a bigger phone as compared to a smaller phone. Since the body itself is pretty small, they have to cram everything in this form factor, and the weight distribution may not be even. Meaning that the phone can kind of feel that it's heavier on the bottom or on the sides, depending on how much capacity is being packed into this. But a larger phone will feel more uniformly distributed because it's physically larger, so they have more room to play around in there. So they can play around with materials and see which one actually is a better combination. So the larger phones usually are more well balanced, even though their actual weight, like the number, is high. So this phone, despite being like 180 grams, feels much more comfortable to hold than this 160 gram phone, and that's because of weight distribution. You will be holding your phone for a very long time. I mean, after all, we all use our phones hours together. So even though the tiny phone is easier to use, the in-hand feel may not be that good depending on, again, the model and all those things you get. If you're buying something like a Pixel or an iPhone, it'll be pretty good, but other Android phones, something like this, may not give you an equivalent good experience. The third thing is a slightly off-axis thing that you may not have considered, and that's the display experience. Now, sure, again, the smaller phone and bigger phone will have the physical difference in display, and you know that smaller phones will have smaller displays and vice versa. What I mean by viewing experience is that whenever you watch content on your phone or any display for that matter, there are two things you have to consider for a comfortable experience. One is the actual display size in your peripheral vision, and second is how far the display is from your eyes. You see, to get an immersive experience, you have to fill your immediate vision with display. Like you can see from here to here approximately. Then you have to fill that square with a display. And if the display is physically small, then guess what you have to do? You have to bring it close to have that immersive experience. Now, if your phone's display is tiny, you physically have to move it much closer than a larger screen to watch content for a long period of time. And you kind of do that without realizing it. Like if you're traveling somewhere or if you're sitting down for a short period of time, then maybe you hold it at a feet or a feet and a half. But if you're watching movies in bed like we all do, you eventually tend to get your phone closer to fill your peripheral vision to get that immersive experience. So that after a while gets tiring on your eyes, and yeah, that's not a very good experience. Now you may not feel the same way as I do. Maybe I consume a lot more content on my phone compared to any other display. But if you do watch a lot of videos and like if you do consume a lot of multimedia, that's something to consider. Larger display size, it's not just physically bigger, it's much more comfortable to view from a distance. Now just by looking at these two phones, this is a 5-inch display and this thing is a 6.4-inch display. I can comfortably hold this phone at least 2 feet away from me, but this phone has to be within a feet to get the same kind of display experience. So that's something people don't really think about. Like yeah, the physical size itself is one thing to manage, but if you're watching a lot of content on this phone, then you'll have a much better or rather more comfortable experience with a larger screen display on your phone than a smaller one. Now, yeah, the larger screen will usually consume a little bit more battery, but the bigger body will accommodate more battery like we discussed earlier anyway, so you don't have to worry about that too much. I personally am a big screen lover. Like I used to have all small phones until the Galaxy S7, but ever since I switched to the Note 8 and yeah, the bigger screen is absolutely the way to go. I love having a bigger display on my phone. It is uncomfortable and I have dropped and smashed this phone because I couldn't hold it in one hand. Dark times. Yeah, I mean, it has to be 6-inch or above for me, otherwise, I'm not satisfied. Yeah. Anyway, that's something I wanted to share about screen sizes and the phone form factor differences. And I guess it's something to consider if you're looking for a phone and you have two different options to buy. I mean, of course, price is one more thing to consider. That's obviously you know that, right? I mean, you are paying for it, so you'll obviously see what you're paying for. But in case you're in a position where you can afford both and you're just wondering should you settle for a smaller one or upgrade to a bigger one, and if it's actually worth it, then this may be something you should consider. If you watch a lot of content or if you want your battery to last longer, like not per day, per year, like the battery's health down the line, then yeah, you should go for a bigger phone. But if you don't want an unwieldy phone and you're not going to use the phone for a long time, like you're probably going to change it in less than a year, and you don't watch much content anyway, and you're not worried about that eye fatigue thing that I mentioned, then sure, we can settle for a smaller phone. Let me know what your preference is in the comments down below, and till next time, take it easy, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.